Sure will. So this is the Mathematics Teacher Education Partnership NIC-Cast, and so we are privileged and excited today to have Michael Greenley. Michael Greenley serves as a Director of Professional Learning for NCSM and is a Professional Learning Specialist at the Charles A. Dana Center at the University of Texas in Austin. He's also a co-leader, author of the NCSM's Educational Technology and AI Guidance for Math Leaders. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, and this is helping shape national conversations about thoughtful and responsible AI use in math education. He's also going to be tag team with Chad McGlone. Did I say that right, Chad? Okay, good. Uh, he's a
Good.
mathematics educator based in North Carolina. He's the co-founder of MathCon Global, a nonprofit that builds grassroots partnerships to strengthen math education in Latin America. He's also the founder of Lesson Atlas, a tool for the U.S. teachers making global connections in a way that encourages students to think. And so, thank you guys so much for giving us some of your time and walking us through some of this new document from NCSM. So, as we go forward, the participation norms. Thank you. Just stay muted unless talking to the whole group. Comment in the chat box as you have comments and times you want to add in, and you can use your hand to raise to call on questions, and we'll let Michael and Chad kind of direct us on the different norms they want as they progress, because I know they wanted to have a little discussion with us some. So we'll cue into you guys. So what's a NIC-Cast? So I know that Michael and Chad, you guys have some cool organizations that I saw too, and I just read that. So if y'all are interested in connecting with some of our network expansions and things, I'd love for y'all to get connected with us to help us grow as an organization. But the NIC-Cast are monthly webinars, meetings, just networks improved to created to improve our community, to share ideas, lessons learned. And so that's one reason why we reached out to you guys, because this was a really cool and interesting document. We were hoping that our teams could have a chance to learn more. So the goals for NIC-Cast is to build familiarity with aspects of the NIC change and research process, and build community and shared vision. And so this is part of our main goal for MTEP 2.0, which is built from our MTEP 1.0 model. And so our main goal for today is to consider the role of technology and AI in mathematics teacher preparation. So um, this is changing, ever changing. So I'm looking forward to learn more. I'll pass it over to you, Michael.
Thanks. All right. I'm gonna just switch over all my stuff here, make sure I got everything set up. Can everybody see my screen okay? Okay, excellent. All right, so welcome everybody. Thank you guys so much for having me to talk about this resource that we have been working so long on. Um, I am joined by Chad here to help me out with this. Chad and I have been co-leading AI Math Task Force. We're both pretty passionate. Um, I would say we're passionate in different ways and have different approaches and different thoughts, which is what makes us kind of a good team to tackle this task of AI in math education in particular. And in our work that we've been working on with this task force over the past year and a half, 2 years now, this document has been one of the main products that has come out of that work so far. And there's lots of other things still happening, lots of other resources. I know Chad has had some great ideas and continued to work on some additional resources and things. So maybe we'll have some time to talk about that near the end of this. We are going to ask for some discussion and interaction at the end. I think this beginning part is going to be a little bit more of an overview of what kind of things you can expect to find in this document, kind of how this came to be and that kind of stuff. So with that being said, I am actually going to ask for just a quick little bit of interaction here at the beginning, and you could just put this in the chat box. But I'd like for you all to think back through your education career, and this could be either as a learner, as a student, or it could be your time as an educator. But I want you to think back of all the educational technologies that you have had the opportunity to live through in your experiences in the education system. I know, like, this can be kind of dating for some of us, and so maybe some of us don't want to share some of them, but like I have been around long enough. I know I don't look it, I look so young, but I have been around long enough to remember film strips and cassette tapes that beeped at you to know when to flip the film strip. I use those kinds of things and overhead projectors really early on in my career as a teacher. And I have seen a lot of great technologies come through since then. So if you want to just throw some thoughts in the chat box of some things you've lived through, I see graphing calculators popping in. Instant messaging. I don't think I've thought about AOL Instant Messenger in years. I can't believe that even crossed your mind. I still have my AOL email address, if that doesn't date me. Let's see. Smart boards. I remember smart boards when uh, the as a teacher. I remember when those came out. Those were the new version of having the big TV on the cart that you wheeled into class each day, and it was always a special day because you wheeled it into class. We had one smart board on campus, and we had to check it out from the library, and so that was always a big deal when I could wheel that into my classroom for the day. Somebody put TV cart. That's perfect. Film loops. Yep. Slide rule. You are dating yourself. Old computers like Commodore 64 and the Apple II. I remember the multicolored iMacs when those came out. You guys remember those? Graphing calculators. Who put colored chalk on there? Come on, Wendy. Yeah, so you guys got the right idea. Lots of different technologies that we've had the opportunity to live through. So just as some that I was thinking of as I was preparing for this, I thought of calculators and graphing calculators, overhead projectors. I remember teaching writing in my elementary classroom on an overhead projector with the spinny wheel and the plastic on it and had to spin the wheel to keep writing, that kind of thing. Smart boards were a big one when those came out. I remember personal computers, never mind what kids have now today, where it's one-to-one computers. I mean, we had a computer lab that the kids had to go visit, and they basically played some basic little games on those things. Remember, I'm surprised I didn't see anybody mention the internet, but that was a huge deal when that came out. So these technologies that we have lived through and that we have experienced having come into our lives in the education realm are what we kind of label as adoption technologies. These are technologies that, as they came out, the education system had an opportunity to have a say in how they were integrated into our classrooms. We were able to study them, we were able to budget for them, we were able to adopt them and bring them in on our own terms. And so they were kind of adoption technologies so that we had some control over them. But in the past few years, what we have faced is this new technology that is AI. And so we have things like ChatGPT and Gemini and Copilot and Claude. These new technologies are coming in, and these are what we call arrival technologies. These are technologies that we didn't have a say in them. We didn't have an opportunity to prepare for them. They just showed up one day in our classroom, whether we liked it or not. And every kid had free, easy access to them because they were on their phones in their pockets every day, right? And that the result of having an arrival technology versus an adoption technology is that the education system reacts to that, right? Instead of being able to study and prepare and adopt and budget for and all that kind of stuff, we are now feeling like we're playing catch up and we're trying to react and we're trying to do so in a very quick manner so that we can, get ahead of the fact that our kids already have this technology available to them. And so we are reacting as a system instead of getting an opportunity to plan. The tools themselves, the AI system and tools themselves are actually spreading faster than our understanding of them. So kids and adults alike are using them more and more and more and quicker without necessarily taking the time to learn about them and understand how they work. And the integration of them outpaces our reflection of them. And you see this, if you go to any conference now and you go into the vendor hall of that conference, every curriculum, every ed tech, every product that is advertised in those vendor halls have an AI sticker slapped on the front of them now, talking about how they have integrated AI and that you should adopt their thing because they have these great AI bots that they've integrated into their product. And the reality is they're integrating these AI bots and these AI things without really taking the time to think about the effect and the impact that's having on the education system and on instruction as a whole, right? And it's because of that we decided as the at NCSM, as part of the AI task force, we decided that it was time for us to kind of step in and provide some guidance on what it takes to make AI a productive and useful tool. Because the reality is AI is here, everybody's using it. Now we need to decide how to make it productive, and so that it's not just a tool to kids use to cheat or teachers use to cheat, to be honest with you. And so one of the ways that we can do that is by developing knowledge in the AI itself, right? And so when AI becomes productive, it actually depends on two particular types of knowledge. You need to have knowledge in the AI system itself, how AI works, and those kinds of things, but you also have to have content knowledge, right? And so I've got a little illustration here that I picked up from a colleague of mine that just kind of demonstrates what happens if we have these particular types of knowledge. So when we think about, there it goes. When we think about if we have a pretty high understanding of AI and how it works and how to use it productively, and we couple that with a pretty high content knowledge, then AI becomes a very productive and useful and powerful tool, right? It's something that we can use. We because we understand how it works, can put in quality and good inputs into the AI. And because we have a deep understanding of the content, we can analyze the outputs and acknowledge and understand and know when the AI is giving us, misinformation or leading us astray, right? And so that's where it becomes a productive and useful tool, when we have the ability to do both those things. If we don't have a really good understanding of how the AI works, and therefore our inputs into the AI may be weaker, but we do have a good amount of content knowledge, then AI systems are safe to use, but our outputs might be, not the best. They may be limited. And that's mainly just because we don't have enough understanding of the AI system itself to know how to get better outputs out of it, right? On the opposite end of that spectrum, we have where a majority of our students unfortunately live right now, which is they have a pretty high understanding of how to use AI, but they don't necessarily have the content knowledge to know when misinformation is occurring. And so therefore you have, somebody who's putting in a lot of inputs to try to get information out of it, but since they don't have the content knowledge, the information that comes out cannot be critically analyzed, and therefore we run the risk of misinformation. And then, of course, if we are low in both of these spectrums, AI really should just be avoided altogether, and because you're at a lot of risk there, because you really don't have enough knowledge in either realm to be able to use it effectively. So from this understanding and this, conversation around like, what does it take to make AI a productive tool? We decided as at NCSM that it was time for us to provide some guidance to the math community. Like we basically figured out that what the math community needs right now is not a list of prompts to use or a list of lessons to use or another list of products to adopt. What they needed was guidance on how to develop AI knowledge so that teachers and students alike can use AI in a productive way, right? The content knowledge, for the most part, from our teachers is there. We just need to build the AI knowledge, that AI literacy, so that they can utilize it. And so we developed this tool, which has already been talked about at the beginning of this, which is this educational technology and AI guidance for math leaders. You can scan the QR code there if you want to access it, or I can actually just I think the link was provided in the description as well, but I can also throw it in the chat.
I
Oh,
just, oh, we both did it.
you beat me to it. Yep. Okay. So you guys can click on that link. That will give you access to the document. You're welcome to kind of scroll through that and peruse it. It's free. It's readily available on NCSM's website. We are not doing printed copies of it or anything like that. It's a digital book, if you will, that you can access. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the kinds of things that you will find in this resource, because we tried to think of like where do we need guidance, right? Where does the math community need guidance right now? And the part of the reason we didn't want to make this a print resource is because we've kind of view this as a living document, because as AI advances and as our needs advance and our use of AI advances, the guidance that they need at the moment is probably going to change with it, right? And so we want to be able to make adjustments on the fly to this document, right? So I keep clicking out of my window here. So just to kind of give you an overview of what kinds of things you would find in this document. So this is just like, I don't really consider this a book, but there are kind of like sections or chapters in the book. So this is just kind of an overview of what those sections would be. So we start the resource out with a understanding the landscape. This is where we kind of talk about how educational technology has advanced and how it's evolved over time, and how AI is playing a key role in that. AI is kind of one of those what I would call a disruptive technology. There's a few different disruptive technologies that have occurred in our lifetime. That's personal computers would be one. The internet is one. And I now think AI is going to be one of those where it fundamentally changes how we have to teach, just because of the available access that students now have with this. And so we kind of talk about just the overview of the landscape with ed tech and where AI's place is in this beginning section. We have a section where it's these core considerations for math leaders. This is where we talk about things that math leaders need to be considering when they're looking at adopting AI resources, into their school systems. So they need to be thinking about equity, student agency, teacher autonomy, transparency, so that everybody knows how the AI is being used, cultural relevance, all kinds of things, right? So we go through a lot of things in that section. Then what I think is probably the most important section of the whole thing, we talk a little bit about AI literacy. This is where we talk about how crucial it is that we build our teachers and our students' understanding of what AI is and how it works and how to use it in a productive and effective way. So this is what we were talking about building that AI knowledge, right? And that's what's talked about in this. So what this resource does not do is provide that AI literacy, right? It doesn't necessarily give you the knowledge you need, but it talks about where to find it, how to use it, and why it's important to provide that kind of professional learning for your staff, right? We have a section on the role of the teacher, because one of the biggest concerns that we heard as we were researching for as part of this task force was teachers being concerned about how they were going to integrate AI, and is this going to replace them as teachers, and what is their role now with AI being in the classroom. So we made a whole section on the role of the teacher in an AI integrated classroom, so that we can clearly define what that role is. And then we have a couple new resources that we've developed specifically for this. One of them is the Spectrum for Technology Integration, and I'm going to go over this with you in just a little bit. But this is just like a reflection framework that kind of helps us determine which tools are right for us, right? Like I said, lots of people are integrating AI into their products now. And if we're going to adopt a piece of educational technology that has AI integrated into it, we need to be able to do that with armed with enough knowledge to know, is that the right tool for us, or is it actually going to step outside of the realm of what we actually need, right? We have a section on developing local policies and practices, and then we have a guidance rubric that we developed. I kind of think of this as like a guidance tool for adopting a curriculum. You know, they have an HQIM guidance tool that helps people decide and rate and rank what curriculums are right for them. This is kind of similar to that in the sense that it's kind of helps you, it uses that spectrum of technology integration and helps you decide which educational technology tools and AI tools are right for you. Okay. And it has some just key questions for you to consider as you're thinking about adopting a piece of ed tech. So I want to dive deeper into just a few of these really quickly. I'm not going to take too long to do this. Like I said, I think the most important part of this is this idea of AI literacy and why it's important. Um, I threw this quote in here just because I think Dan Meyer has a lot to say on this topic. I don't know if any of you are following him and what he's been saying about AI. Some of the things that he says I agree with. Some of the things he says I think are interesting and worth exploring further and more in depth. But I did really like this quote that I found in one of the articles that he put out on his LinkedIn, where it says, the dominant theory right now, which is just give students a weaker version of a stronger tool they can easily access at a different URL, or in other words, just put the cookies on a slightly higher shelf than the vegetables, is clearly inadequate. And what this made me think about is part of the reaction, because AI is so happening so fast and it's happening to us, right? It's not something that we've had time to research and study before it came into our classrooms. Some of the reaction in the education system right now is let's ban it, or let's put restrictions on it and make it not available to our students. And one of the ways that we're doing that is we're adopting AI tools that are available to our students and to our teachers at school, something like Magic School, if you're familiar with that. Magic School is a real big one right now, which there's nothing wrong with that system, but basically what it is it's a system that puts really strict guardrails on AI, right? And it allows them to have access to it, but it allows them to have access to a much weaker version of it for a good reason, because it creates safety for our students and for our staff for using it. But the reality is you're not going to stop a student from going home and accessing the much better free version of it that they have readily available to them on their home computer or on their cell phone. And so just creating this system that's only available at school that sets those restrictions in place is not going to fix your problem, right? You have to still teach students how to use it effectively, knowing that they're going to access the better version of it that's readily available to them when they go home, right? And so that's why it's so crucial that we don't just adopt something like Magic School and say, okay, job done. We don't have to worry about it anymore. You still have to worry about it. You still have to teach kids how to use it. In this document, you'll see some information about AI literacy from, I'm sorry, I was looking at the chat box there. Some information about AI literacy from Digital Promise. We use Digital Promise for a lot of the research that we did around AI and things like that. And I really enjoyed their framework for AI literacy. This is a simplified version of that framework. They have since made this a little bit more complicated than this. But in this simplified framework, basically what they say is that there are 3 pillars to AI literacy, which I think is really important for us to acknowledge. That it's not just about understanding how AI works. That's just one part of the big picture. We also have to teach our students and our teachers how to actually evaluate what those outputs are, how to actually look at those outputs with a critical eye, how to analyze them for bias and things like that. And we also have to teach our teachers and students how to actually use it and interact with it. Like, what are appropriate prompts? How do you actually get the best result out of it? So there are these 3 things that all kind of work in conjunction together, and they are intertwined together in the sense that you can't really evaluate a AI output without understanding how it works, and you can't really use AI effectively without understanding how to evaluate it and understanding how it works, right? So they all kind of work together. And so this is where it falls on us to actually start thinking about, okay, what kind of professional learning do I need to provide for my students and for my teachers to make them effective users of AI? And then I want to highlight just a few of the core considerations that we call out in this book. Here's a quote directly from this resource where it talks about how just giving students access, because access is a big concern when it comes to this AI thing, is like, is it equitable where every student has equal access to it? And the reality is what we need to be more concerned with is, do the students actually have access to good quality instruction, good quality education, right? There are a lot of kids who will have free access to AI platforms, but are not getting good instruction. And the kids who don't have access to the AI platform, but are getting good instruction, will actually be in a better situation, right? And so it's just something to be thinking about, that it's not necessarily about making sure it gets in everybody's hands. It's more about teaching teachers how to use it and still integrate good quality, high quality instruction. And so one of the other main core considerations for math leaders is this idea that leaders need to ensure that when we integrate technology into the classroom, when we integrate AI into the classroom, it encourages student sense making, not just correct answers, that it provides opportunities for students to choose strategies, not just follow steps, and it invites reflection and justification, not just reaction. I mean, this is just good teaching. Promotes students as collaborators with the tool, not consumers of it. This is all just good teaching. This is good instruction, right? And so if we adopt a tool, we need to make sure that we're ensuring that these things are happening. And this means that we need to be thinking about AI as a idea provoker, not a answer generator, which is what a lot of our students want to think of it as an opportunity to get the answers easier, right? So, for example, what could this look like? It could mean that a student might use AI to generate multiple representations and then analyze which one is most useful. A student could use AI generation, an AI generated explanation could be critiqued for accuracy and clarity. This is something I used to do in my elementary classrooms before AI was even a thing. I would put up misconceptions or wrong answers to problems that I had made up and put it up there and have students analyze it for where it was wrong and why it was wrong. It's no different. It's the same activity. It's just now we're using it as an AI analyzing thing. And then students might explore a modeling tool that allows them to test hypotheses, make predictions, and revise their thinking based on outcomes. So these are just some examples of what this could look like. And just real quick, just to touch on some of the things that are talked about in regards to what does the role of the teacher actually look like. And I'm going to zip through this pretty quick. But basically, it's that the teacher still has to design meaningful math experiences, that AI is not going to do that for you. And I know AI can quote unquote write lesson plans for you, but I have seen teachers take the best written lesson plans and turn them into a garbage lesson. And I have seen teachers take absolutely nothing or garbage lesson plans or garbage curriculums and turn them into amazing lessons. So it's really up to the teacher to design the meaningful math experience for the student. The AI can't do that for you. It's up to the teacher to facilitate discourse and sense making. AI can't do that for you. Responding to the whole child, the AI doesn't know the child at all. You can put in data points about the child into the AI, but that doesn't give it understanding of what that child is going through or what they're dealing with or how they approach mathematics or anything like that. And then making human-centered decisions obviously starts with the human first. The teacher has to do that. So in other words, AI should extend, not replace the expertise of the teacher. And our guidance tool talks about some different ways that it can do that. Okay, and so I'm going to really quickly go through the spectrum of AI technology, which is one of those things that we just designed for this resource. Remember, this is a spectrum that kind of allows us to decide what AI or ed tech tool is best for us. It was really important to us that we were not saying that different tools were good or bad. We are not experts enough to be able to make that decision to say this tool is good, this tool is bad, right? What we wanted you to do is we wanted to empower teachers and math leaders with the information that they need to look at a tool and decide, is this tool right for me? Right. And so that's where the spectrum was born from. And so on one end of the spectrum, you have what we called automation, right? Automation is where the technology is actually delivering the instruction. It's grading the students' inputs automatically. It adjusts the difficulty without the teacher input. The teacher's role basically becomes as one that can just monitor what the students are doing. And you may look at this and just say, well, this is bad. We don't want this. And I could see that is kind of correct because this isn't an ideal way to teach, right? But there are situations out there. I do a lot of work in New Mexico, for example. New Mexico has very rural school districts. Like there is a district that I know of where there is a single teacher who teaches all of the middle school students math. One teacher, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, teaches all the math classes. That teacher does not have the capacity to provide every one of those students with equal opportunity to take whatever advanced math they may want to take. You may have a student in there who's ready for a more advanced course, but that because you're down to one teacher, they don't have the capacity to do that. That's a situation where having an automated system that could actually take on the role of the instructor and do these things would be useful, right? And that's a very particular situation where that could be useful. Moving along the spectrum, you have the guided use, which is where most, I would say, ed tech is living right now. This is where the technology offers suggestions, prompts, or data to inform the teacher's decisions, but the teacher very much still plays a role, right? The teacher is interpreting the outputs coming from the AI or from the educational technology, and they are actually still leading the instruction, right? And then where we're trying to get to, which I still have not seen a piece of technology that we can adopt that can do this yet, right? And that is amplification. This is where we are using the AI or using the technology to um, to enable us to explore or look at multiple representations, and that the teacher is basically still very much in charge of the learning. They're still designing all the tasks. They're still facilitating inquiry, but the technology is enhancing that by allowing them to do it in a more profound way and taking some of the cognitive load maybe off of the students so that they can think deeper about certain topics, right? We're working our way there. I think we're closer to this now than we were 2 years ago for sure. But I still just haven't seen a piece of ed tech that can do this perfectly yet. So this spectrum of technology integration is what we use to design the guidance rubric. So when you think of the guidance rubric, again, this isn't a rating system in the sense that you decide if a piece of technology is good or bad. This is a guidance rubric to decide, is this technology right for me and my context, right? And so the guidance rubric actually starts with a pre-assessment to help you define what your context is. And then using that information, it has some key dimensions with very particular questions underneath each key dimension to kind of help decide, is that piece of technology going to do what I need it to do, right? And so some of those key dimensions that are in there is what is the teacher's role in autonomy? So they're asking themselves, does the tool constrain or support the teacher decision making? Student thinking and engagement, does the tool promote reasoning or discourse or procedural compliance? Equity and access, does the tool support all learners' identities and equitable participation? The transportation and interpretability, that's such a hard word for me to say. Can educators and students understand and integrate how it works? And then finally, alignment with math teaching practices. This is where we say that whatever tool we adopt should align with what, national organizations such as NCTM and NCSM have identified as being high quality, good instruction. Okay, I'm thinking of like the NCTM teaching practices, the 8 teaching practices, thinking of the standard for mathematical practice, things like that. Okay. So I just did a whole lot of talking just to kind of give you an overview of everything that you can find in here. And then Chad is going to do what he does best, and he's going to elicit some conversation out of you all. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say about all of this. We'll turn it over to you, Chad.
Great. Yeah, to me, I've been thinking about this a lot in the past couple of years. And honestly, I learn more when I listen to other people. And to me, I've seen a real shift in the way people think about AI. Probably a year and a half ago, people wanted to put it back in the box and let's legislate it. I mean, I think that's still the thinking. Let's think about what rules we could put in around AI. But here's the thing, it's here. If we don't teach kids to engage with it meaningfully in the classroom, they're going to go home and engage with it. Every one of us will probably engage with AI at some point today, even if we're not using ChatGPT or Claude or one of the others. So, given what we know about AI, what do you think students need to know now from a mathematics classroom? Do you think it's the same as what we needed to know when we were in school? Is it different? And this is where you all have to talk, because if not, you're going to listen to me talk at you. And I prefer not to do that. So raise your hand, let me know, and I'll call on you. So the question is, what do you think students need to know now that AI is such a prominent part of our life? Yes, Gary.
I think that's the $64 billion question. And I don't think we have a really good handle on it. I mean, to a degree, this has been a continuum, as the basic calculators to scientific calculators to graphing calculators and more advanced technology. Really, the need for procedural skill goes down and down and down. But you need to know something to be able to apply the procedures from the technology. I mean, it's not just like it's going to do it for yourself. You still have to know something. But what is it that you really need to know? You need to have a sense of what's going on mathematically, some conceptual understanding, and so on. But what does that look like? I really think that we're shooting in the dark right now. I've been around a long time, and I've been watching people keep hanging on to the past, and I think we're still doing that.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, okay, so what is it? What are the tools that students really need? I don't think there's an answer to that yet. I think we have a lot of work to do to figure that out.
It's a dynamic time to be here, I think, in our field because of that. And I think, Gary, you're saying something that I think is really important, because what is the distinction between being able to, like, I can get a result from my AI and go, well, wait a second, I'm not following your thinking because I've had some math training. My wife might not to say anything about her but she would probably see it and go, that makes sense. Let me check it out with Chad, like I would with writing. So there is some sort of expertise that we need to know to engage with it. I think I know that I have a relationship with my AI, and I need to think about what that looks like. Another thought.
I was just thinking that I agree with Gary. I don't think we know what we need, but I think there's kind of an added layer to the mathematics that we're helping children learn, is that now they have to be able to evaluate something else or someone else doing the mathematics, which is kind of a layer that we get into that with teacher training, but we don't get into that with the teaching of mathematics.
Can you say more about, so you're saying the student needs to, so
I think they need to be able to evaluate whether or not AI is giving them a reasonable response.
Don't you think that's an important thing? So, like, if we think about procedural fluency, which has been a real focus, right? We want our students to have a procedural fluency, but frankly, that might not be enough now, because AI can produce something that is fluent. Is it correct? I need to have evaluative fluency.
Yeah, it can be very convincing in the way that it gives answers out.
Mhm.
Um, so how do we teach students, how do we teach learners of mathematics to be critical of that?
Yeah. What are the basic skills that make us in mathematics able to look at those things?
You know, to go with that, Chad, it makes me think that when I think of mathematics as a subject, right? I think of it as two pieces, right? There's the content, the core content of like knowing how to add, subtract, multiply, divide, all those different things, right? There's that part of it. But then there's the reasoning and the problem solving and the thinking skills that is a very large part of it that people who lack content knowledge tend to neglect that part of it, right?
Mhm.
And this is where I consider AI to be a disruptive technology because AI can do the one hand. The AI can do all of the solving the problems and getting the answers part. What it can't do is do the reasoning and justification and the thinking part of it, which means that we as teachers have to change how we teach. If we're relying on correct answers in math, that's
Mhm.
not what kids need to know anymore. What
Right.
kids need to know is how to reason, think, and justify and do those kinds of things.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And I'm actually working on a project on what does it look like to assess an AI. And, we've relied on, and it grew out of this idea. I have a friend who says, and maybe some of you are in the same boat. I don't like assigning essays anymore because kids can just go home and type into AI and get a great response or a sufficient one. And then she said, we'll stop assigning essays. Great. What do I assign? That's the challenge. And so I've been thinking a lot about that. What is understanding if a product, and Michael, you just said it, the product AI can produce something now. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. We need to be able to evaluate if it's right or wrong. And there are some things that we can look at. But I'm working on that project with Gail Burrell, and she's constantly saying, well, this is the way we talked about mathematics instruction in the 90s and in the 80s and in the aughties. So, and Michael, you and I have talked about this. Maybe AI was going to push mathematics teachers to teach the way we know we've wanted them to teach for the longest time. Any other thoughts about this question? Because we can move to the next one.
I mean, I've also just been thinking about AI, thinking about like the graphing calculator argument of the whole using appropriate tools strategically. And I
Mhm.
see AI as fitting in that very broadly, with the caveat that when we got graphing calculators, I feel like, I went to a TI workshop back in the 90s and then I was equipped and I did stuff with my class and it didn't change. Like
Mhm.
I could use the calculators in October and then in January we could use the calculators and they would work the same way. And I feel like that's not where AI is.
Oh,
That, you know, a year ago I teach my class and the AI cannot answer the homework problems correctly in the modeling class. But this coming fall, will AI be able to do it? I don't know. Nobody knows. And I think that to me, that's a little bit of a different of, I think part of it is we need to just build into our practices having those conversations.
yeah.
The thing I've landed on is having the conversation with students of like, all right, on the spectrum from that is cheating to this is such an amazing tool, everybody ought to be using it for learning. Like, let's talk about different ways to use AIs in the class. Um,
Mhm.
and I think that that
Yeah.
conversation, like it's, we don't just finish it. It's like we agree for that class, but then the next class we have to have the conversation again because AI will have different abilities at that point.
Right. So on the one hand, with calculators, we had to still do the reasoning. The calculators did the operations. AI can give us a reasoned answer. Is it correct or not? That's where the evaluation comes from. And honestly, what you really want is this assessment that you're doing is a proxy for understanding, right? You're saying, if my student can do this, I can assume they understand. Now, if my student can do this, I can assume that they know how to type and they have access to a large language model. So I have to look at something else. And so like the things I'm thinking about is like you combine 4 or 5 things together and look at it. And actually that's the sort of next question. So rather than me say that, Michael, can you turn to the next slide? So the next question is if students can produce well-reasoned arguments instantly. Like I have an example, one of my favorite essay tests is in graduate school, actually as an undergraduate, was American history. Have George Washington and JFK debate the Vietnam War, and think about what I had to know about George Washington, the politics of the 1700s now, and the Vietnam War to answer that question. Well, a student can answer that question pretty well now and not even know who George Washington is. So how do we truly know someone understands the concepts? And since I am here in pollen country, I'm going to mute. Someone please unmute and tell me what your thoughts are.
One of the things I've done in my classes is because I get to teach relatively small classes, not 50, and we have these classrooms that'll go up to size of 42 that just have whiteboards all around. So during class, I have my students at the whiteboards in groups and I talk to them. So I feel like I do get to understand what they understand. And then, of course, they do the homework, which may or may not represent what they truly understand versus what AI did. But I mean, I had some very honest students who are like, well, I put this in AI and here's what it says. And I still don't have any idea what this is about. So I made sure to reinforce and appreciate, like verbally, like, hey, somebody said this. Like, I really appreciate when you do that because that tells me what I need to, have us learn more about. So those
Yeah.
seem to work pretty well.
Yeah, you want your students to be able to ask the question, this doesn't make sense. How can I make sense of it? And that works with AI still, right? Can I answer that? What if I did this differently? That's the representation things, right? Um, which am I using to make this the correct answer? If you have multiple representations. And what do I remember from the past that helps me work here? Those are things that if I can do that, that demonstrates understanding. But of course, AI can do any one of those. So you have to know your students, which means, in that the way we've been talking about teaching since the 80s and before, know your students. Um, because Wendy, the question I'd have for you is, how does that scale? What if you have 100 students? Can you do that then? And also, how do you give a C in that kind of situation, or an A for that matter? I don't know. So you guys are going to give us the answer. Is it 7? Because that's what I'm hoping.
I mean, I think going to standards-based grading for people who haven't done this yet, or if it's not standards of just, you know, grading based on mastery of learning outcomes for a course. That feels like a way that still lets us. I mean, I also think grades are archaic and demotivating and bad in many ways, but if we're still in a system that assigns grades, going off of mastery of learning objectives feels like the least objectionable way to do it.
Right. And so what is mastery? Is that understanding of what those learning objectives are? Or is that producing a product that achieves something? I think it's understanding is what we're looking for. Yeah, Gary.
So here's the interesting point is, can students use AI on a test?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they're going to use it in everything else. So, okay, true story is I'm giving a test tomorrow and I said no devices because I want to see what you can do. And I'm wrestling with it because in a way it's sort of like, well, if they could really use the tool well, maybe they could come up with a good argument. But they can also just reproduce things that they're seeing and not really understand it. So I have no idea with the grading. In terms of instruction, I think there are workarounds like, okay, put your devices away, work on it for 5 minutes, talk about what you got. Now get your device out and get some ideas from the AI. How does that compare to what you did before? How, what does that point out that you need to do differently, et cetera, et cetera. And so it then becomes kind of a part of the classroom process. But I can kind of control that to some degree, at least for now.
Right. Well, you need to teach your students to be fluent with the way they
Yes.
evaluate what they're getting, because I would say, yeah, my daughter teaches a graduate school, which I can't believe that she's teaching a graduate class now. But she says to her students, because her students have come to her and said, well, my AI says that you graded this wrong. And I have, yeah, she's like, I am in a PhD program. But also she says, we're looking at this in a much more nuanced way. So if you're going to give me something from AI, I want you to make me think about it. And to me, that's sort of a good way of thinking about this is if you're going to use AI, and that's what you said, Gary, you're going to push, I want to see you push your thinking with it. Again, how do you give a grade for that? Is that C use of AI or that's, I don't know. I think we're sort of breaking a worldview about grading looks like. Any other thoughts? So, Michael, I'm thinking we go to the last slide and let people sort of see the GPT that I created. So if you guys go to this website, tinyurl.com NCSM I created a GPT. And so I know probably many of you know what GPTs are, but I'm going to just quickly give you an overview. It's literally like a thread, a chat GPT thread that is trained first on this book and then on other things that I've done in instructions. So, you can create one that really is focused on your thing first before it goes to the internet and looks at whatever is out there. Because frankly, there are a lot of bad examples of teaching on the internet. And so for me, when I wrote this, I was like, read this document, use this document as your guidance, and then considering, some of my favorite authors in mathematics education and NCSM and NCTM guidance. So when you ask it something, it'll give you good conversations. But frankly, the thing I love doing with books now when I get PDFs is I want to say, what are some main themes in this book? Well, wait a second, I don't understand that, but here's the way I understand that. So I really have a conversation with my GPT like I would a graduate student or a professor. And so that's sort of what this is here for. And if you're really struggling, like I think Gary, your question, how can I let my students use AI in a way that pushes them? That's a great question to ask this GPT because it's trained on this document that you just read. So, are you all able to get to that okay? And so maybe we have a couple minutes left, and so I know that we want to save some time for some questions. So I think let's stop there as long as you all have access to the GPT. What I would like to do is I'll put my email here. I've been working for about 6 months on what does assessment look like in the age of AI. I'm calling it what the gradebook cannot see. So I have this document. It's free and it's in draft form. It's getting better each day. I'm happy to send it to you if you email me. And then I have a more sort of public facing for all subjects, not just mathematics, that I'm happy to share with you. So I'll put my email in the chat right now and you can email me. Okay. And now I think it's like I want to hand it to Gary or whomever and open it for questions.
Okay, we have about 2 minutes or so for questions. I'll just show a few announcements. Any final questions? So with my question is with this link you gave us, so that is basically you created a GPT that's trained on the book itself.
Yes, yeah, yes, right. Because if you have crazy ADD like me and can't get past page 10 without getting distracted, this is a great tool. Or you think about a lot of other things on the side. So, yeah, that's what this is. And the first thing, this is very true to the book. I've been testing it for about 6 months now, and it really, I'm always very pleased. And I wish Michael were here because I'm sure some of the things that it says are like words that he's saying. So,
I'm here. I didn't go anywhere.
good. No, I meant in the middle of the night when I'm working with this.
Oh,
I can call you. I'm happy to.
well, it doesn't appear that we have questions, but I do want to just, before you do your announcements, Gary, just say thank you all for letting us come and share this resource with you all. We're very excited about this resource. We're very excited to get additional feedback and thoughts around it, or maybe some things that you think should be added to it or things like that. Because like we said, it's a living resource. We want to make sure that we're updating it constantly. I've also put my email in there. You can reach out to me as well as Chad, and we work pretty closely together when it comes to these things. So, we can work together to make this even better.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. I enjoyed the discussion. It was very thought-provoking. I'm really disappointed that you didn't answer all my questions, but I'll get over it. But thanks again for sharing. A couple of I don't think anyone has the answers is the problem. So a few quick announcements. Reminder that the network expansion subhub meeting is coming up on Friday. Marilyn, did you want to say a word about that? You're muted.
Just want to encourage people to come out and share with us. And CSM people, you're welcome to join us too. We're talking about these issues that you mentioned and others. So welcome everyone that is able to attend.
Okay, and then while you're talking.
Also on April 17th, we have a partnership building and networking meeting. We really would like people to come out and share with us. We're inviting some of our new teams as well as some of our more seasoned teams to talk about their partnerships and how they developed and the types of things that they are focusing on as a team. And so since we're narrowing down our time as MTEP 2.0, we're not recruiting new teams, but we want to talk about how our partnerships can get stronger within each other. So please come and share with us on April 17th.
All right. So, including you already said this, the two new teams, which will be interesting to get their perspectives. And then, well, I guess I could call on you for this as well.
Oh my goodness.
Marilyn, you're just like the
You
star.
just done the announcement.
You could have just done the announcements.
But on April 24th, members of the math teacher education, members of the mathematics. Wow, I keep messing up with MTEP and MET3. Members of the Mathematics Education for Teachers, Volume 3 authorship team will talk about what's in MET3. We hope that people can come and attend this workshop or seminar to learn more about MET3. We'll also talk about some of our connections to Set 2, which is the statistical education of Teachers 2, to help advertise these two books as great resources for people to use as they develop programs and as they strengthen their mathematics teacher education programs, K through 12. So thank you.
All right. And then just again, sign up for the newsletter if you have not done so. And here is all the link to our link tree where you can learn more about MTEP. And again, thanks everyone for being here. Let's keep the discussions going.
Thank you for having us.